There's a fuel leak right here. You can see the drip of fuel that's coming out, and it's a very slow leak, and it's out of the steel union fitting. Chances are it's probably that the flare on this steel side here is a little small. We have the nickel copper side right here and the steel side. Nickel copper is a whole lot easier to flare, but sometimes the steel can be a bit tricky, so we're definitely going to check that, because a flare that's a little bit small could easily cause the fuel leak we're having right there. One thing that you want to keep in mind is that this line might be under high pressure. This is the feed line, and there's a lot of PSI pressure in this line that's held over long periods of time, so a good pair of safety glasses is a good idea. And this is why working on gas lines is always fun. We'll just use a pencil, which is a nice round source, and we're going to plug it just because the gas tank is higher than this fuel line, so it's going to keep draining until the fuel tank gets to a certain level, and we don't want to waste the fuel. I would say this flare is fairly decent size, but it needs to go a little bit bigger because it's about the same size, maybe a little bit smaller than that lip, and you want it to go a little bit farther so the very front of this nut crushes it into the union, and that's what makes the seal, and I think it's a bit on the small side. I'll put the flare tool on. I'll install the flare tool onto here. This is the threaded part, this is the cone, and this is what presses the flare into it. And I left a bit of a gap between the tool and the flare so there's room for it to flare out a little bit more. Once you tighten down on this, you just make sure that these threads here are lubricated so they don't grind, and we go ahead and tighten this and complete the flare. Now we'll pull this off. Check the flare, it definitely is bigger, and that is a good sized flare. And here comes the fun part, because we've got a full fuel tank, so we've got the fuel level and it's gonna keep spewing out gas while we try to screw this back on. So it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be messy, but it should be pretty quick. Now this flare actually is a little bit too big, so it won't fit into the union, and that's because the flare here is bigger than the outside diameter of the thread, so it won't quite fit in. It's kind of frustrating. Now I'll file the diameter of the flare down a little bit so that it'll fit into the union. I'll check this with a union of the same size, just because it's a pain whenever you have to pull the plug out and get gas everywhere. Everything fits together now. I only had to file just a little bit off the edge. Now we can go ahead and thread it into this union. And time for the fun part again. Now we'll tighten it up. I'll snug up both sides to make sure everything is tight. And we'll want to wipe this down with a rag and make sure that there's no gas so we can see if there's any leaks. And since inflation is so high, you know, who cares? We'll start it and check for leaks. Now, sometimes it might still not seal, and what I'll do is I'll just take a copper crush washer, put it in the union, and then whenever you tighten everything down, the copper is going to crush and make a good seal. I had to grind it down a little bit to get it to fit in there, but now it fits nice. We'll go ahead and put that copper crush washer in here, but there's a few things you can look out for. One thing it can be is a cracked flare, and when we take this off, we'll look for that, but the copper crush washer is fitted and ready to go in. So we'll feel and look around for a crack. All right, we'll go ahead and add on that crush washer, which we've got right here. Now whenever we start it, it's not leaking. It's now been running for about 10 minutes and everything is completely dry. If you've got any fuel leaks, even if it's on the high pressure side, there's a few different ways to fix those.